The gym photos that bodybuilder Masuo posted about Taekook generated a wave of comments that are still ongoing. These aren't just meaningless images, but material that many directly relate to the collaborative post from August 4th. That collaboration was enough to leave those who always try to discredit Taekook restless for days and nights, unable to bear the idea of Jungkook and Taehyung being so close, with gestures overflowing with affection and so much love. And this is where everything gets even more interesting. It's not just what they show, but how they do it, with a naturalness that seems impossible to fake. What's striking about the gym photo is that, according to several observations, it appears to have been taken in Los Angeles the same day Taehyung recorded that video of Jungkook training. The collaborative post also features a photo of Taehyung carrying his signature bear bag, the accessory that identifies him so much, and which stands out because the location where the photo was taken bears a striking resemblance to the Los Angeles gym. What's evident is that each piece fits together, as if everything were part of a puzzle that only those who closely follow his every move can put together. Taehyung, with his unique and always striking style, proves that only he can dare to go to a space like a gym carrying such an adorable fluffy bag, without losing elegance or personality. The curious thing is that upon closer inspection, you can see he's also carrying a different bag on his other shoulder. The inevitable question arises, is it another bear bag, or perhaps a bunny one? That simple question has generated all kinds of comments, because each of Taehyung's accessories seems to have a special meaning, and fans don't overlook anything. And as if all that weren't enough, the expressions on both of their faces are another factor that can't be ignored. It's impossible not to stop and stare at those pouting lips that both Taehyung and Jungkook display at different moments. Seeing them like this, sharing such adorable and almost synchronized gestures, makes the perception of them as a couple even stronger. Because it's not just a photo or an isolated moment, it's the repetition of gestures, glances, and ways of interacting that build a recognizable pattern. The curious thing is that the naturalness with which they behave conveys the idea of an intimate bond, an emotional habit that goes beyond what anyone could plan in front of a camera. Our beautiful couple, Taekook, continues to connect with people precisely because of that mix of tenderness and authenticity they project. No matter how many try to sow doubt or invent rumors, the truth is that each joint appearance, each gesture, each detail, ends up reinforcing the affection they have for each other and the love the audience perceives in them. Now, recently, many fans are once again desperate because they can't accept their favorite's reality and want to continue pushing Taehyung into the middle of the narrative, driven by their envy of him. In their attempt to sustain a story that no longer holds water, they once again created completely false and out-of-context edits, trying to convince others of something that isn't true. The most ironic thing is that the person spreading this material claims not to be anti-Taehyung, but if you look closely, their comparisons and arguments are exactly the same as those of any fan intent on fabricating false rumors. In other words, beneath the guise of impartiality, there is only the same intention to manipulate fans' perceptions. And here lies the first big mistake. People shouldn't believe these edits because, if examined closely, they are full of inconsistencies. A clear example is the supposed day Taehyung met that girl at a Tyler the Creator concert. Upon closer inspection, anyone can notice that Taehyung wasn't wearing any bracelets at that event, while in the edit, they appear artificially added. Furthermore, you can see that the buttons on the girl's blouse are upside down, positioned in a way that doesn't correspond to the actual garment. These details, although they may seem small, are precisely what reveal the flimsiness of the montage. The funniest thing of all is that, out of all the possible options to prove something, this person chose to post a photo at a zoo, supposedly showing Taehyung on a date with the girl. The choice of this scenario reveals an absolute lack of creativity and obvious desperation. Because, instead of using solid evidence, they end up resorting to fabricated scenarios that only work for those who want to believe in them at all costs. And it is precisely this desperation that reveals the fragility of the Jikook narrative, they have no facts, only repeated fictions. Meanwhile, the reality is clear and confirmed. The company has already announced that Jimin has a partner, and that is a fact. Although many try to deny, hide, or ignore it, the truth doesn't change simply because it isn't accepted. This is the point that most bothers those who insist on a different story, no matter how much they repeat it, no matter how much they try to sow doubt with edits and rumors. The truth is that Jimin has a partner. And what's interesting is how, despite this truth being stated and reaffirmed, there are still those who prefer to invent parallel scenarios rather than face the obvious. On the other hand, when we observe the relationship between Taehyung and Jungkook, the difference is abysmal. They don't need others to invent situations or construct narratives around them. Their actions are direct, clear, and transparent. When they go places together, they make restaurant reservations in advance, always in private, protecting their personal space. And most importantly, it's not the fans or the rumors that sustain their bond, but what they both say in their own voices. Trust in them shouldn't be based on what others repeat, but on what Taehyung and Jungkook express themselves. This is where the true contradiction is revealed. While the Jikook remain trapped in a cycle of despair, creating false stories where nothing exists, the Taekook show themselves increasingly united, and above all, more in love than ever. This union doesn't need fabricated defenses or artificial rumors, because it sustains itself. It's a bond built with facts, with real moments, with shared decisions that speak for themselves. And every time they try to obscure it with fabrications, all they achieve is further highlighting the difference between what's false and what's authentic. In conclusion, the strategy of those fabricating rumors is evident. They resort to inconsistencies, crude edits, and meaningless scenarios. But the truth always prevails, and it's impossible to hide what is sustained by the naturalness of gestures and the clarity of the facts. Jimin has a partner, Taehyung and Jungkook continue to build their path together, and meanwhile, the rumors only show the desperation of those who do not want to accept what is in front of them. One of the strongest aspects of Taehyung and Jungkook's relationship is the way they communicate without speaking. They don't need to utter a single word for their connection to be evident. Some try to reduce everything that happens between them to a fan service strategy, something designed solely to entertain fans and keep the public's attention alive. However, one only has to observe them closely to notice the difference between a manufactured gesture and the naturalness they display when they're together. Every glance they exchange, every seemingly insignificant touch, and every moment they look at each other feels as if they're in a separate world, without the need for a stage or an audience. Naturalness is impossible to fake over and over again. When a gesture comes from the heart, it is repeated spontaneously and effortlessly. As a result, some fan groups have tried to divert attention by insisting that Taehyung already has a partner, pointing to a girl who, as we all know, has nothing to do with it. The most revealing aspect of the bond between Taehyung and Jungkook isn't a single moment, but rather the sum of many small moments that, when combined, form a pattern. At first glance, someone distracted might think they're nothing more than spontaneous gestures. But upon closer inspection, the certainty emerges that behind these actions lies an invisible structure. It's not a single touch, not a single glance, they're emotional routines that are repeated every time they're close, almost like an intimate habit. And that's where the relationship takes on another dimension, because what seems casual becomes a language of its own, a silent code that's activated again and again. The curious thing is that, the more you observe, the clearer it becomes that none of this is a coincidence. This type of interaction allows us to see that their bond has grown over time. Before, they were short, fleeting moments, difficult to capture. Now, however, they've become constant, natural, and almost inevitable. Jungkook and Taehyung don't try to hide it. On the contrary, they let it flow in front of the cameras and off, as if hiding it were pointless. And that's why, for those who follow their story closely, every moment isn't a simple scene, it's further proof that what exists between them has grown stronger over time. What's interesting is that this strength doesn't come from grand declarations, but from the everyday, from the simple, from what emerges effortlessly. At the same time, Taehyung has always known how to stand out with his unique style. A clear example is how he can dare to walk into a gym carrying a fluffy, adorable bag without losing an ounce of elegance or personality. A closer look at the image reveals that he was also carrying a different bag on his other shoulder. This inevitably raises the question, is it another bear bag, or perhaps a bunny one? This detail, which at first glance may seem trivial, becomes a symbol of how Taehyung transforms the everyday into something striking. The funny thing is that in the context of her relationship with Jungkook, those details become even more interesting, because every object, every gesture, every repeated action speaks to a pattern that repeats itself over and over again.